I have no idea what we did. I have no idea what the point of this was. Who are these people? There's your battle scene. Hello, friends. Welcome to the porch. We have a serious discussion, and that discussion is about Dark Age by Pierce Brown. Book 5. Yes, 5. In the Red Rising saga. We need to talk, my friends. So I have two different parts of this video that I'm gonna do, and if the light sucks at any part, we're gonna like scooch, you know. One is gonna be spoiler free, and that part is probably gonna be the part that sounds more pissy than the spoiler section. So if you want to jump straight to the spoiler section, be my guest. I will have timestamps below. Timestamps below. Enunciate your words, Jordan. This video is gonna sound a lot more pissy than I'm meaning it to be, and it probably is gonna sound like I fucking hated this book. I did not hate this book, but I'm very conflicted about how I'm feeling, and I hope that if any of you guys have read this book, you will watch this video and hopefully leave me a comment either saying that you agree with me so I don't feel so alone, or tell me why I'm wrong and convince me otherwise, because I am so conflicted. I don't even know what to rate this book. I haven't even rated it on Goodreads or given it a review or anything. If you're not following me on Goodreads, go follow me on Goodreads. It's in the description. Anyway, I haven't even rated this on Goodreads because I don't know how to rate it. I'm so conflicted about it. So without further ado, let's get into it. The structure of this book was difficult for me, okay? So this book is split up into different parts, right? And in each part, we're following a certain number of the POVs that we have. We have, like, how many POVs? 1, 2, 3, 4. We have 5 POVs in this story, and each part of the book follows a different set of POVs. This made me feel so detached from the other characters who we're not focusing on, and I feel like we were missing a lot of things that were happening with those characters that we just weren't seeing, right? So when we actually got to those characters, I felt like I was entering into a conversation where I had no idea what the fuck we were talking about. I felt like I was just plopped in the middle of their arc, right, for this book. And I feel like this got a lot more prevalent as I went on because, you know, obviously I got really into part 1 and then part 2 comes and we just leave those characters that we were following in part 1 in the dust until later on in the book. I felt like I was just missing action that I really would have wanted to see. That wasn't the case for Iron Gold. We kind of flip-flopped back and forth between all of the different POVs, and I felt like I got a more whole view of everything that was going on and everybody's role that they were playing. Also, within that, there were multiple different chapters back to back to back following the same POV. Let's say we're in part 1 and we have 2 different POVs that we're focusing on. Well, 5 chapters are from this one character's POV, and then we hop to the second character's POV. I don't know where the fuck they're at. We just plopped right into the middle of an action scene. I have no idea what they're doing. And that just made me feel even more isolated in the story because I would get excited about something that's happening in this character's POV, and then we don't see them again for another 40 or 50 pages. Now, I'm not saying that I need to live through every single fart and fanoodle that these characters go through, but I like my stories to be really linear, where I can have a full view of what's going on with all of the characters, and especially if we have multiple POVs, I want to know where each of one of them stands, what they're doing, why they're doing what they're doing. I don't just want to be plopped in the middle of a situation without any build-up. Plus, the POVs that were kind of grouped together felt isolated in a way that I hadn't experienced before in the series. It kind of felt like I was reading 3 different books at the same time without knowing how each of them connect. Does that make sense? Because Lysander and Darrow are grouped together, Lyria and Ephraim are grouped together, and then Virginia, who's a new POV that we get, is just off in the stratosphere doing her own thing. I felt like I was reading 3 different stories without knowing how they connected within the plot as a whole. My next big point is that I feel like this book was too big and it was too violent. The scope was so big that I missed the small things that I feel like were in the previous books. Sorry, there's a school bus. Character interaction was so minimal that I felt like I was starting to lose interest in these characters that I had grown to love. The violence was so often and it was so brutal that I, again, started to feel like I just didn't care anymore, right? Because it was lacking the depth. It was lacking the base, right? With Pierce Brown focusing solely on action, we're missing those character interactions that make me feel for these characters. So when something bad happens to them, or if they're in a difficult situation, I don't care because we don't have that character interaction that I had gotten from the previous books. And Pierce Brown is so strong in these character interactions. I love these characters. With every fiber of my being, I love these characters. And without those character interactions, without the small moments that I feel like were prevalent throughout the first 4 books in the series, I feel like the structure of this book just kind of feels like a big jumbled mess. In the span of a sentence, hundreds of thousands of people will die, and we're just like, okay, moving right along, like moving on to the next thing. It's to such a massive scale. Like, this is a really big conflict. It's on such a massive stage that I feel like we weren't really narrowing down into those character interactions, the character development that I had loved so much in the previous books. Now, in terms of writing style, I obviously still love Pierce Brown's writing style, but the word bedlam is used so many times. It's at least once per chapter, most of the time multiple times per chapter. It was like he had just discovered this word and he was trying to use it in as many sentences as he could. I get that that was what he was trying to get across, but I feel like he could have showed us bedlam, right? He could have showed us bedlam. He didn't have to tell us that it was bedlam. It just got on my nerves so bad that I was literally underlining every time he used the word bedlam. I just, ugh. And this next point goes back to the lack of character interaction, the lack of connection that I felt with the characters, the humor and the dialogue that was just so on point in the previous books is like non-existent. It's non-existent. There is no humor, there is no hope, there is no balance between that dark and the light quality. It's all just, for lack of a better word, bedlam. My next point is that there was no build-up, okay? Right from page 1, we are entering into this 200-page long, massive battle. There's no build-up of the plot. There's no establishing where we are, why we're here, what we're doing, what the plan is, what's the tactics that we're gonna use. It's just boom. I wanted a little bit more of a build-up and a lead-up to this initial conflict that we're dealing with. Along with that, most of the plotting and the planning and the analysis and the thinking that the characters had previously done on the page is done behind the scenes. So it's just like action scene to action scene to violence to violence to action scene to action scene. Like I said, with no depth. There's no reason why we're doing this. Why are we doing this? What is the plan? How did we get to this choice that we're making now? It's just like boom, 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 boom. And I just didn't like it. I didn't like it. I couldn't connect with it. Now, talking about the violence, which I kind of got into this with the action scenes, there's no downtime. It's all just violence. It's all violence. I feel like this book relied a lot on shock value. With everything going from violent scene to violent scene to action scene to violent scene, there was a lot of scenes that were supposed to be shocking and just horrifying. But I wasn't shocked. I wasn't horrified by the end. I was just like, okay, because after a while I just became so detached from these characters that I had previously loved. The violence and the brutality had no depth to it whatsoever. We were just doing it to do it. One of the things that I love about this series is the balance between darkness and light. Throughout the entirety of the Red Rising trilogy, the initial trilogy, and also book 4, Iron Gold, there is this overarching feeling of hope. This book has no hope. It is the most bleak book in the series. I feel like without that balance of darkness and light, I felt like I was missing something. I mean, are there some light moments? Sure. There are a couple of light moments, but most of the time we're just going from violent scene to violent scene to violent scene. And I don't know about you, but I don't particularly want to read a book that's just shit after shit after shit after shit after shit. I've heard a couple of booktubers recently describe this book in particular as grimdark, which I am not overly familiar with grimdark. I've read Joe Abercrombie, but that's like the extent of my experience with grimdark, and I don't shy away from the dark scenes. I like exploring the complexities of war and the consequences of the actions of our characters, but I want the violence and the action and the atrocities and the brutality to have a reason. I want it to have a build-up. I want it to have a base that it can stand on, where we're not just like, let's do this horrifying thing because it's just flimsy. It's just flimsy. Why are we doing that horrifying thing? What is the purpose? What is the end goal? We lost that really solid foundation of the characters and the plot, and we just kind of went violence, action, violence, action. And I just felt like it really just fell flat for me. I wasn't emotionally invested. I wasn't intellectually invested, because I didn't understand why we were doing these things. Because we would hop from these characters to these characters in like really isolated groups. And I felt like all of the meat of the story was happening behind the scenes, and I just felt like I was missing something vital in the story that would have given it that emotional depth, that intellectual meat, you know what I mean? Because I like complex battles. I like complex militaries. I like big, brutal scenes that just go on and on and on and on and on. That I like that stuff. I loved Wrath by John Gwynne, which the last 200 pages of that book is just a massive battle. I loved that book. But when it doesn't have that baseline, it doesn't have that foundation, everything just falls flat. It just feels like a big mass of crumple rumple, right? And also within the action scenes, I felt like this was the first time in this series where I felt like there was a real lack of clarity as to what was actually going on. And that may be because he was trying to depict the kind of chaos of battle, but the action scenes just felt like an explosion. In previous books, I kind of described his battles and his action sequences as like a crunching and a gurgling kind of action because it was really personal. But this one, it was just like everything's flying around, everything's exploding, there's fire everywhere, people are dying, and that was the battle scene. It was just kind of like I took a piece of paper and I just went there's your battle scene. I couldn't follow anything that was going on. Now, as for the tone of this book, this was really weird for me because the tone of Iron Gold was very different from the tone of the original trilogy, right? And that's why so many people didn't like it. But I feel like Dark Age is so much different from the tone of Iron Gold and also different from the tone of the original trilogy. It's so different in tone from every other book in the series that I felt like I was just being yo-yoed around. As for the plot was all over the place. Like, I couldn't tell you what the plot of this book was. And again, I feel like that has to do with the structure and isolating these certain groups of characters from each other. I have no idea what the plot of this book was. I have no idea what we did. I have no idea what the point of this was. I just don't feel like we've moved forward at all. I feel like we're kind of stuck, if not a couple steps farther back than we were at the beginning of the book. I genuinely don't know. I don't know what the plot was. What was the purpose? What was the point? I don't know. Not a lot actually happened in this book, which makes me think that it might be in prep for Lightbringer, but I thought that Iron Gold was preparation for Dark Age, so now I'm confused. As for the villains in the story, I felt like the introduction of some of the villains felt really forced. We didn't get to know the villains. The villains in the original trilogy, I loved them. I felt like we knew them on a level that we just don't know these guys yet. They're very stereotypical, and we don't know who they are. We don't really know their motivations. Like, what are they doing? Why are they doing it? Who are these people? So overall, here are my thoughts. I think it lacked the charm of the previous books, in the dialogue, in the characters, in the humor of the previous books. It really lacked that charm, which was a huge draw for me. The structure was just whack, okay? The structure was just whack. It felt like 3 different books. It felt like I was missing something the entire time because I was wanting to know what was happening with the other characters that we're just not focusing on for 200 pages. I felt like it lacked character depth. The plot, we don't know her apparently. We're not familiar. I feel like this book was too big for its britches. All the little pieces just kind of drowned in the scope of the thing that Pierce Brown was trying to create. I felt like it lacked clarity. The villains are lame. I'm sorry, the villains are lame. I felt like there was too much tell and not enough show. And there was a lot of violence just for the sake of violence, and it lacked the depth that would have made me care about said violence. Now let's get into the spoiler section. So if you haven't read this book, bye, see you later. But the spoiler section is going to be, I can go into a little bit more depth about things that I liked about the book. Like I said, there are things that I liked about the book. I'm not like a huge hater, so let's go into the spoiler section. The addition of Virginia's point of view was fucking perfect. Her POV was one of my favorites of the book. I loved what she went through with that because we got to see Severo. Because where the fuck was Severo? Where was Severo during the entirety of this book? I get it. I know intellectually, I know where he's at, but that doesn't mean that I'm happy about it. He was my favorite character in the series. Where the fuck is Severo? I mean, he was there a little bit, and when he was on the page, I was like, yes, I love Severo. But where the fuck is he? Where the fuck is he? And I feel like with him not being in the book, that really cemented the fact that there was just no humor. There was no humor. There was no light. I really was missing the dick jokes, you guys. I was really missing the dick jokes. But I want more of Virginia's POV. And also, what the fuck is going on with the jackal? What? Are you fucking kidding me? The jackal has been cloned. We'll get into that later because I don't like that. I don't like that. I really liked exploring more about the Red Hand, and I want more of that as well. The Red Hand is a part of the series that I feel like has been overlooked until this point, and the whole arc with Lyria infiltrating the Red Hand and like entering into like the child bride lottery was just fucking weird. I do want more of the Red Hand. I don't know if we're gonna get more of the Red Hand now that Harmony's dead, you know, which with Pierce Brown's track record with this book, she might come back to life, but I hope that she doesn't. I hope that she stays dead. The Fear Knight is another thing that I really enjoyed. I think he is a freaky ass dude, and I really like him. Him going around impaling people on shit and wearing like this weird like white mask, I don't know, he was just a whack job, and I really liked him. Of like the new villains that we're following, I really like him, especially in comparison to Atalantia. Atalantia is just a horny aunt who wants to sleep with her nephews, and it's just fucking weird. It's just fucking weird. Lysander, can we talk about Lysander for a moment? Lysander's questionable motivations and actions were so interesting, but also fuck him. Also, fuck him. In Iron Gold, he's going through this identity crisis. Like, who is he outside of his grandmother's name, right? Who is he outside of the society? And now he's like, you know what? I think I know how to make this world a better place, and that's by hooking up with my aunt and allowing her to literally commit war crimes. Like, let's do that. Let's do that, and also take back control of the society, which I get because that's pretty much what he's been raised to do. That's pretty much what his grandmother trained him to be, is her heir, right? And so that's all he's known, and without Cassius, which we'll get to him in a minute, but without Cassius, he's gotten back on the game board. And so now he has to figure out what side he's on, and he's obviously not going to be on Darrow's side because that would make too much sense. I'm so interested to see what's going to happen with Lysander in the next book, because his whole shit at the end of that book, oh my gosh. So I guess the spoiler section is gonna just be all of the things that I actually liked about the book, because the next thing is Ephraim with the kids and the obsidians. Oh my gosh, that was so cool. I loved that. Can you see why I'm so conflicted about this fucking book? I loved Ephraim and the obsidians and the kids, and how Ephraim kind of became this foster dad to Pax in this situation and giving him the support that he needed. Also, killing off Ephraim when he has just now started to redeem himself with Volga, whack as fuck. Whack as fuck. Like, are you kidding me? I could not believe that. But his death was also super fucking lame. Like, he just like explodes this and he's like, oh, Volsumfa is dead. Like, Volga, you'll be able to live forever. And then Volsumfa is like, worthy, and just fucking eats his heart. Like, what are you kidding me? That was so lame. So lame. But the whole arc of him training the Skoogie and, you know, getting closer and closer with Pax, I just, gave me all the warm fuzzies. I loved it. Victra, Volga, and Lyria is like the dynamic trio that I didn't know I needed. I loved that whole section. Like I said, Lyria with the red hand, but also Victra having her baby, and then having her baby viciously murdered by the red hand. That was rough. That was rough. And the whole like rescue that Lyria went on to get Volga and Victra out of there, so good, so good. Orion, that was whack. That was whack. Pierce Brown could have done a lot more things with Orion. We could have explored more of the PTSD aspect of the war. I think it would have brought a lot of more depth to, you know, like I was talking about, everything lacked depth. Like, we just find out that Orion's back, she has PTSD, now she's gonna kill millions of people and we're gonna kill her. I felt like he could have done so many more things with that. I felt like we could have explored a lot more things with Orion's character if she would have lasted a little bit longer. Maybe like not killed like millions of people. I felt like her story could have been so much more interesting, but nope, we just killed her off. We just killed her off and then we forgot about her, so that's cool. Now let's talk about the resurrection trope. I fucking hate the resurrection trope. And the resurrection trope was used not once in this book, but twice. We have the Jackal, who we beat in like the first trilogy. Like, he's dead. Why do we have to bring him back? Why did we have to bring Cassius back? What the fuck was the point of that? Which I kind of predicted that Cassius was not dead because we never saw the body. I have this thing where like if we don't see the body, they have an option to come back, and we didn't see Cassius's body. That was my prediction, was that Cassius was not dead, but still, come on. I don't like when authors pretty much lead you to believe that somebody's dead and then they bring them back to life. I fucking hate that. And I feel like Pierce Brown must have just written himself into a corner and didn't know how to get himself out. Couldn't figure out how to add an enemy that was worse than the jackal. So he's just like, well, let's bring the jackal back. I don't like that. I don't like that, but I'm interested to see what he does with it. I don't like the concept, but I think that he could definitely execute it well, and I think he could win me over with the resurrections. Which is funny because I was actually prepared for Darrow to die based on the comments that I had received on previous videos, based on just like the vibes that were going, especially at the end. I was prepared for Darrow to die, and I think that would have made a lot of sense considering the situation that they were in. But of course, Cassius swoops in and saves the day, like, hey, BT dubs, I'm actually alive. The deaths that we did get, I didn't really give a shit about them. I didn't really care that Sephi died. Ephraim, I cared, but I think his death was lame. Alexander, I thought he was dead for like the first half of the book, so I was pretty much prepared for him to die anyways. I was glad when he was alive, but then I was like, oh, now he's dead again? Okay, that's fine. Orion, like I said, her death was lame. I felt like Pierce Brown could have done a lot more with that. Seraphina, she fucking died. What is Diomedes gonna do? What is the point of Diomedes even being there now? Because he was at the beginning of this book and now he's just not in the picture. Who else died? Oh, Tongueless died like in the prologue? Like, what the fuck? I was reading that. I had just started the book and I was like, oh, okay, so Tongueless is dead now. Cool, all right. Moving on. And again, I just feel like the deaths lacked emotion and depth, and I feel like we were just like, okay, now they're dead, now we're gonna move on. So those are all of my thoughts about Dark Age. I've been sitting here for a very long time and I'm cold. I want to go back inside. But I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please make sure to join the NotSoAverageJo army. We are currently apparently hitting and missing with so many of the books that we were anticipating to read this year, but that's fine. Hopefully my warriors down below will convince me that I am wrong and tell me why. But I hope you guys have a fantastic rest of your week, and I will see you next time.